start there. And before I forget, we'll also have the poll going, I guess. Hopefully everybody can see that and I'm not obstructing anybody's view. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. And if I am obstructing your view with my little poll question, let me know and I'll try to reposition it so everybody can see what we're looking at here. But thanks again for joining us. So I have Chase Norlin and Kristen Bay joining us today. They're going to go over Transmosis One and Cysurance, and specifically we're going to talk about cyber attacks and the financial implications of a cyber attack. So if you have questions, as I've said a couple of times, please just put those in the Q&A session and we will try to address those as we go throughout the course of the event here. So before we begin, though, I'd like to have Chase and Kristen take a moment and talk about their respective companies and maybe a little background on themselves, and then we'll kind of dive in. So Kristen, you want to go ahead and start?
Great. Yes, thank you. My name is Kristen Bay. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cysurance. My background is both financial risk management as well as cybersecurity. So over the years, I've really looked at how do we integrate true risk analysis and technology, which is how we got to Cysurance, really trying to figure out how we help support the managed services community and security service providers and product providers, really bridge that technology and risk management gap to really create that financial backstop to help support these organizations, not only show the value of integrating cyber stacks for their customer base, but also to be able to understand what creates durability and the opportunity to leverage this hard market in the cyber insurance world to start to qualify more effectively and get better rates for cyber insurance.
Okay, thank you. Chase, you want to give us a little background on yourself as well as Transmosis?
Yeah. Thanks, Cory. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. We are Transmosis. We're a partner of Cysurance's, and we're going to talk about that here today, this combination of liability coverage and cybersecurity technology, which as a theme, we actually see as a trend that's growing in the industry. We're going to see a lot more of. We'll get into that later. I run Transmosis. We've been around 6 years. We come at the cybersecurity world from training cybersecurity analysts through state and federal funding. And in doing so, we've built an entirely new product that we launched last year called Transmosis One, whose entire focus is to protect small businesses, specifically small SMBs and micro businesses from cyber attack. We're going to talk about why that is, because of this massive increase in threats against SMBs and small businesses in particular. And our solution is a unique kind of combination of different elements from next generation XDR technology to a 24/7 SOC and this integrated liability coverage, which we've partnered with Cysurance on, that's delivered in a monthly subscription model, something that really hasn't been done before. Those combination delivered in an easy to implement subscription model. So we'll get into all of that, but Cory, yeah, thanks for having us on. Look forward to diving in here.
All right. Well, appreciate both of you taking time to join us. So I think maybe the best place to start would be if you can give us some sort of just a general overview of maybe the environment that we're dealing with right now. I mean, it seems like there's a scourge of ransomware attacks that our customers and their customers are facing on a daily basis. So for either one of you, how bad is it? Who's getting attacked? How many attacks are we facing? I mean, what is the situation that small businesses are dealing with right now?
Kirsten, you want to lead us off?
Well, sure. I mean, what we're seeing from a claims perspective is that they're continuing to accelerate, especially in the SMB category. If you look at the overall history between like 2019 to today, a lot of SMBs don't really perceive themselves as or being at risk to cyber attacks, yet they have had 1,000% increase and actually more over these last few years in comparison to the Fortune 1000 or even the middle market. So this is something that the attacker certainly views as low-hanging fruit. And what's interesting is in the last quarter, when we've been watching, is that cyber attacks broadly are starting to drop, or not attacks, but the effectiveness of the attacks where it's a claimable event. But so they've dropped about 8%, but the small business category has increased 7%, sort of quarter over quarter. So we're seeing that that's continuing to be the attack surface that the bad guy is looking to leverage. And so that's creating a lot of challenge for insurability. And that's why looking at the security stack is such an important component, because when you're answering that question, yes, I do X, you had better actually do whatever that is, whether that's multi-factor authentication, whether those are the right vulnerability analysis scans, et cetera, really, because it's important to not just sort of teach to the test in terms of having that policy where you can answer those questions, but you're actually implementing those controls such that you're effectively reducing the risk to your environment.
Yeah, and I'll just maybe add a couple of thoughts on that, or some stats that we've seen. Again, our entire focus is small businesses. So we have a lot of not just third-party information on this, but real-world experience protecting these small business customers. They're the #1 target for cyber attack today. Inversely, they are the least protected, especially the smaller that you get. You know, the SMB market broadly, the problem with a lot of this is that people use different terminology. You know, SMBs, you know, the Department of Labor describes as like a 500-person company, and big cybersecurity companies like CrowdStrike, you know, they're going after that SMB market, and I think they look at that as being like 200 or 300 employees, so like 2,000 or 3,000. But when you get smaller, you know, even sub 500, sub 200 or 300, you know, these are the #1 targets for these cyber attacks today. 60% of them go out of business after a breach. You know, 80+%. This was the last stat I had. Kristen might have new ones. 83% carry no cyber liability coverage whatsoever, especially the smaller that you get. And now 70% of these ransom attacks, according to our last stats, are targeting these endpoints, which we'll talk about. I think, Cory, is one of your upcoming questions. There's a tremendous amount of financial liability that's living in the endpoint. And then, of course, very relevant to our listeners today is that these distributors, and we all know this, like the Kaseya attack, you know, MSPs, MSSPs, you know, agents, VARs, IT consulting firms, et cetera, they're technically, I'd like to hear Kristen talk more about this too. They're technically, we understand, carrying more risk than the actual end customer because of how many touch points they have with customers. They're providing technology services to them. I believe the insurers view that as actually even being more liable. So we actually find that when we're out distributing our product in the channel, which is how we sell it, our first customers end up being the MSPs who are out there, you know, selling the product to that end customer. So there's just a lot of marketing. I believe that the industry has a marketing problem because a lot of these things that we're talking about today, a lot of MSPs and the actual end customers just do not know about.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for that. You guys addressed a couple of big points. I think the one I was going to ask specifically is what is I mean, if there's data on how many businesses are failing because of this. And I know that one of our attendees here put in that they saw a stat where there were 65% of businesses fail within 6 months. And I think you had a similar stat, Chase. So that's pretty scary. So is there any information on if they do survive, what is the financial impact of an attack?
That's a great question. Yeah, go ahead, Kristen. I got some.
Well, so what we're seeing right now is for the category that Chase mentioned, where you're talking really like 500 and below is considered SMB. But then if you're talking about the really small, like 100 and below, the average ransom payment right now is $130 some odd thousand. And so, but the thing is that whether or not you're remediating a ransom payment where you're actually paying it, which we're hoping that security stack that's in place enables us to sidestep the payment, the remediation and potential breach notification is actually costing 4 to 6 times what the ransom request is. So the real cost of these breaches isn't even the ransom itself. It really is the greater concern of whether there's been exfiltration. And that's really kind of the new thing that's happening in the environment right now, which is your $100,000 ransom turns into a $600,000 or $700,000 loss on average. And this is something that the SMB needs to be particularly aware of. If you have records, whether they're personally identifiable or, you know, if you're a small medical practice, any of those things, there has to be a full forensic analysis of whether there was exfiltration of data. If it wasn't encrypted, then we know that there has to be a much broader remediation effort and perhaps even a breach notification. And in certain states like California or New York, and it's growing, there are minimum damages for those organizations. No matter how small you are, there are some states that exempt very small businesses, but California does not. And so these are other considerations when one's thinking about the potential outlay of resources that have to go into settling these types of cases.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. That was really good. We try to break it down very simply for our small business customers and the MSPs to understand what this overall financial risk looks like. We break it into 3 categories, and I'm sure Kristen can expand upon it. The first is this first party liability. These are things that small businesses don't even think about today, because this is a kind of a broader theme, or what's happened in the last 10 years. Everything has become digital. I'm kind of being oversimplifying here, but essentially all this new cyber risk didn't exist 10 years ago because everything is digital. I mean, people were using, like credit card transaction systems and swiping cards. Now everything is done through Stripe, e-commerce backends, et cetera. So the whole world has become digital for these small businesses. That's what's created effectively all this liability that they're not aware of. That's actually the whole purpose of this webinar. And we break it into these 3 simple categories. First is first party. It is exactly what it sounds like. You're directly attacked. You've got a ransom. You got to pay that ransom. There could be reputational damage. Customers are not going to come back. Very, very bad. Obviously, this is a key selling point for MSPs and MSSPs who are talking to customers, because a lot of these guys or guys and girls who run these SMBs and small businesses don't know that, don't even know the basics of this, and the most basic first party liability. Then of course there's all the third party liability. Now that ties into this whole everything becoming digitized. So you're transacting with partners online, you've got CRMs, you're connected through APIs, a lot of businesses transacted and done online. So now you could be potentially liable. Again, this is why I brought up earlier, the SMB liability, because they're connected to so many, the MSP liability, because they're connected to so many customers. So this connection to customers creates this third-party liability. You can be sued. There's legal costs. There's settlements. Larger companies may just drop you. That Target hack a few years back, that was through a vendor that ran the HVAC system. That was, Wi-Fi connected. So obviously they dropped that vendor. So now you've got all this third-party financial liability. Everything I just described, this first and third party, is already in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not 7 figures. And then now there's the third part, which is, compliance failure. So there's these increasing amount of these stricter privacy laws, New York and California kind of pioneering that, if you will, through the CCPA in California and the SHIELD Act in New York, which means that, and I believe a lot of other states are now adopting this, which means that you have one customer in your database that's released online and accessed, and you can now have lots of compliance related failure fees and fines associated with that. Could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So all of that wrapped together can be multiple 6- and 7-figure financial liability, literally for a 10 or 20 person company, which is pretty scary.
Well, one of the other things that that was mentioned earlier is the liability for the MSPs. That have we really touched on what their exposure is, what our customers, our partners, what their exposure is if their clients are not protected appropriately?
Yeah, well, there is a twofold answer to that. I mean, certainly the MSP has tremendous liability because they are the one-to-many, and much like water finding the path of least resistance, so does the hacker, right? And so it's really the target of opportunity. And so in these past years, with RDP and RMM tools not being secured in the way they should be, with credential stuffing being one of the primary challenges there have been a number of attacks that have taken down not only the managed service provider, but also locked down their customers as well. And so this has created a really, really challenging market to even get insurance if you're an MSP for your tech E&O coverage. And likewise, the other side of that liability equation is that while the MSP is struggling to become insured, insurance carriers will certainly write their customers, which I find to be a little bit dissonant, because they are not really looking at the infrastructure that is in total being deployed. But be that as it may, what's happening is that there are a number of requirements being implemented that, for example, like some Chubb policies, they require a 45-day patch cycle. And if you haven't patched in 45 days and your MSP is patching for you and you roll out to 50 or 60 days, you have a 25% degradation of coverage. and that continues on as the days pass, it actually flips over and goes all the way down to 75% loss of coverage. And so if the MSP doesn't know this, and so many MSPs sandbox their patches, and they're doing all the things that are actually responsible in terms of making sure they don't mess up people's environments by rolling out patches too quickly, but they could be creating liability for themselves if they're unaware of whether they their clients have these types of limitations or sublimits or other types of programmatic changes in their policies that may drive liability for them. So it's really important also to make sure that there is a very clear path of communication between the MSP and their customer to ensure that everyone's in alignment with what those requirements actually are.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. That leads into my next question for you, which was just about the the insurance industry in general. And it seems like it's getting more and more difficult. And you've already touched on some of this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway and just really address it head on. But it's becoming more and more difficult for people to obtain cyber liability insurance. A lot more hoops to jump through. What options are available for MSPs as well as their small business customers? And then, what are the challenges that they face? And then if you could just kind of talk about how that whole dynamic is changing right now.
Well, the key thing is being able to verify and provide proof that the primary security controls are in place. So those traditional ones would be multi-factor authentication, and they'd be on an email at a minimum, but more broadly, depending if you're an MSP, they would also want to see them on RMM and RDP tools. There are certain firewall settings, patch cycles, obviously I just mentioned, very, very critical. And then there are also internal policy requirements, like making sure there's dual authentication for wires. Are two people approving wires? Are they verifying wires that come out of band to protect from those business email compromise issues? Firewalls, if you're not a completely cloud-based organization. But the key thing also is identity and access management, which obviously through multi-factor is helpful, but we all know that identity and access management privilege escalation is really where the attacks are propagating. And so being able to show that is one of the key areas that's being managed in your organization is really critical. And so that's impacting insurability, and for people who are in high-risk categories like healthcare, technology services in particular, web-based organizations, those are companies that are going to face additional scrutiny and either very significant premium increases or the inability to get renewals. And so the other thing we're seeing is that you may have contractual requirements for like a $5 million policy as a vendor, and there are many cuts now for the size of premiums we can qualify for. So there are a lot of components going into the insurance world that are really reducing coverage amounts. Non-renewals are becoming more of a constant, which is unusual in the market. And so making sure that you have the right technology partners in the right stack that you can prove really are there will certainly change that dynamic and also get you a premium that is much more affordable than what people are starting to see. I got one today that someone had a 360% increase in their premium. So it's really a challenge.
Wow, that's good news. 360% increase, crazy. Okay, well, thank you for that. So I think I'd like to kind of shift gears a little bit. So again, if anybody has any questions on any of the topics that we've discussed so far, just go ahead and shoot a question over. But maybe we can address the specific solutions that we have available through Transmosis and Cysurance. So Chase, if you could kind of walk us through Transmosis and how you specifically go about protecting small businesses through our MSP partners, and what can we do to help protect them from an attack?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I actually want to take one step back and set the stage for that and why we partner with Cysurance, and taking Kristen's description there a level deeper, in that what we're seeing is the majority of financial liability for small businesses, SMBs, et cetera, and of course MSPs, it's living in their endpoints. Actually a lot of small business customers don't even know what an endpoint is. It basically means desktop, laptop, or server, whether it's physical or in the cloud. And what's making matters worse, and it was already bad, is this work from home environment. So just think about all these employees are all working from home. They have a company laptop, they got their own laptop, insecure Wi-Fi connections, insecure IoT devices, half of which are made in China. So the threat to those endpoints, that employee desktop or laptop, is massive. And the financial liability that lives in the endpoint is massive. I think, now we haven't done studies on this, and maybe Kristen has some data on this, but you're talking about that's where all the passwords live. That's where sensitive company data is. That's where you could be ransomed or extorted. That's where your home photos are. You get access to email. So, we believe that for small businesses, the number one thing to do is to lock down endpoints. And the reason is all that financial liability is living there. It was already there pre-COVID. It is way worse now with this, this whole, work from home environment that we have. So, with that world that we're in now, that's exactly why we, without being over promotional here, that's exactly what we set out to build 2 years ago, which is, well, how do you, in a cost-effective and efficient manner, lock down SMB and small business endpoints and provide them with the corresponding liability coverage should something happen? Because even as a small business owner myself, I didn't even know all this a couple of years ago. And so then the number one thing I did when we started even building the solution, it was to lock those endpoints down. And you're talking tremendous financial exposure, not just on the business side, but actually just on the consumer side too. So, anyone sitting with all their information, sitting on their desktop and laptop, again, whether it's on the laptop or not in the cloud, these cyber criminals can get access to that. So larger companies or larger SMBs, of course, they've got more sophisticated systems, right? They've got network security and email security. Maybe more of them are in the office. They have a cybersecurity IT person. That's great. Our combined solution, which I'll talk about, is very relevant there too. But really the sweet spot and the really large gap in the market are these smaller businesses, many of which don't even know that their endpoints are exposed, and they don't even know the financial liability that's sitting there. They've been operating for years, thinking that. And on top of that, many falsely believe that antivirus is enough to protect them, which is really crazy. Those are great companies, Norton, McAfee, et cetera. Those are great companies, but antivirus isn't anywhere close to being what you need to lock down endpoints. Certainly for the consumer, we believe that, and definitely for the small business customer. And we see tons of small businesses and even MSPs that are using like antivirus, consumer antivirus or next generation antivirus and thinking that they're safe. Super scary stuff. They're not. In fact, what you're hearing right now is the exact sales pitch that we help our MSPs and VARs bring to the small business customer. When they hear this, we have extremely high conversion rate. So, and just briefly on the solution, and I'll give this to Kristen, is that, again, our whole thesis, lock down endpoints and then provide back-end liability coverage. So with our solution, what we did was we took an enterprise class solution that protects endpoints, what we call XDR or extended detection and response. Essentially, it's the next generation version of these EDR systems. Many of you guys know what EDRs are. They're endpoint detection and response platforms, but typically what you see in the mid to large enterprise or even the Bank of Americas of the world that are using to protect those endpoints. The next generation version of that are these AI machine learning version technologies that we're using, which by the way was rated 2 months ago the #1 XDR in the world by Gartner. And we bring that to the small business market and the micro business market. That's never been done before. And then we connect that to a 24/7 security operations center and team that we literally assign directly to our small business customers. That is something, that combination right there, just on the technology side, something you do not see in the small business market, and certainly not in the micro business segment. Now I'm going to hand this to Kristen now, because the final piece of that is, well, that's great, but somebody always gets through. There's no such thing as 100% protection, in cybersecurity, obviously. So we went out, did a lot of diligence and vetting, and really realized that we had something very unique with Cysurance and a partnership that could be done. And that's what we did. We actually integrated Cysurance into our platform. So essentially what we have is almost a pre-approval, if you will, from some of the major insurers and reinsurers in the world that are sitting there looking at our XDR and the 24/7 SOC and saying that is typically way above and beyond what we're used to seeing from a protection point of view. And therefore, you Transmosis are mitigating our claim risk. And that's, so what we've done, we bundle that together. And so now that actually eliminates the approval process from having to go to traditional cybersecurity insurance. As long as the customer is running our XDR on all their endpoints, and their patches are up to date, and they're doing the other things Kirsten talked about, making sure MFA is in place, et cetera. We're activating up to $1 million in liability coverage through Cysurance, wrapped in a monthly subscription model. It's super compelling. It's solving a big problem, especially as small businesses realize it's like you said, it's getting harder and harder to get this liability coverage.
Yes.
Perfect. So before I shift gears, I know you were mentioning Kirsten, and I agree that's really where we want to go. You had spoken a little bit about the fact that Transmosis is really geared towards small businesses, which is perfect. I mean, that's really Uplevel's core DNA, as well as working with MSPs that support the SMBs. Can you give us just a quick idea of what a typical customer might look like, an end user customer? I mean, multiple locations, headcount, that kind of thing. And then last thing on that would be, are there upfront costs or contracts, or, I mean, any hooks, I guess, for the MSPs to be aware of as they're talking about this to their clients?
Yep. So the sweet spot for, again, our combined Transmosis One Cysurance solution, again, in that subscription model, I would say on average, like our average customer size right now is around 50 to 100 employees. That's typically almost 1-to-1 or 1.2 in terms of endpoints. Some employees might have multiple computers. That's the average. We're servicing down to literally 2 or 3 employees, and up to, call it 500 to 1,000. But in our model, and what we're seeing in the industry, is to, we're going smaller effectively, because as we get smaller, that's what we see, is that they don't have the budgets, they don't have these sophisticated technologies in place. We see consumer antivirus a lot, which is really crazy. I mean, we even see consumer antivirus or next generation antivirus in 50, 100, 200 person companies, which is just totally insane. And so what we believe these small businesses need is basically a fully managed solution. And the industry calls it managed endpoint protection. That's essentially what it is. But see, the problem with small businesses is that they can't typically get access to this from the traditional cybersecurity companies. The traditional cybersecurity companies don't service, typically speaking, those smaller markets, and also very expensive, and also require contracts. That's the way that they sell. And like you were saying, Cory, on these 1- and 2-year contracts. So that's exactly why we built this and partnered with Cysurance, was to eliminate all of that. Effectively, we've absorbed Transmosis, has absorbed all that risk. And the whole purpose is to pass that through the MSP, through the channel, to that small business customer, so they can literally within a matter of like an hour or two, flip a switch, have all their endpoints locked down, have a live security operations team watching all their employees 24/7 for all these potential threats. And of course, having that Cysurance, $1 million liability coverage sitting behind the scenes, should something happen. Again, no contracts.
Perfect. All right. Excellent. So let's shift gears a moment and look at the financial protection component of that. So I guess the first question is, Kirsten, is this insurance or is it something different?
So no, it is considered essentially a service warranty. And so what we do is we tie specifically to the deployment that's given to the customer. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One is because I am a firm believer that part of why we have these challenges in the broader cyber liability market is because we're not tying to the efficacy of the solution itself. And so for us to really make strides in changing the viewpoint of this marketplace, what we need to do is help people understand what creates severity, impact, and frequency of events. And by having a robust security stack, that dials down dramatically. So I like to say we have too many cyber totals and we need more cyber fender benders. And that really helps reduce that severity and impact of solutions. And so it's a twofold solution. One is it gives people that financial backstop, but it also gives them the right security stack that can help protect them and get them rapid remediation if an incident actually occurs. And so we are able to package this with these solutions at a very affordable cost. And then if people want to add on to and have a cyber liability coverage in addition to, we can help provide that very easily with very good premiums. But for many, this is a great start to be able to get ransom coverage or the breach notification coverage, compliance related coverages, and so on. So it kind of shrinks it down into the things that are acting specifically to provide those protections. So it gets people started and really helps them focus on the key things, because for me, especially for small businesses. The challenge is it feels like this infinite, deep, dark well of badness, right? And so with this, it really enables people to prioritize what matters, prioritize what's going to be effective for them. And prioritization in cyber is really one of the great things that everyone struggles with. And so it really helps point people to and orient them towards, this is the place to start, and then we can mature your organization, we can grow you into higher coverage, more products, so on. But if you just do these things, you have a really good chance of withstanding some type of attack.
I wanted to add to that, Cory. So we dumb that what Kristen just said down for our small business customers. It's effectively, we're enabling through this partnership them to get cyber liability insurance without having to go through classic insurance companies to get approved for all the reasons that Kirsten's talking about, since this is technically a service guarantee or a warranty. But what's really cool about CySurance's product is that it pays out and covers many of the classic cybersecurity types of claims that we would be paid out. It's called paying a ransom, paying third-party lawsuits and legal fees, even compliance failure fees and guarantee, et cetera. So being able to, and also to be able to light them up and to turn them on within a matter of hours, as Kirsten also said, to be able to pay out, quote unquote, a claim, or a breach. I think CySurance was at 15 days or something like that. So essentially a very unique product with CySurance that by making it a service guarantee or a warranty, we're able to provide that kind of coverage, which is getting harder to get for those small businesses, wrapped with the technology. That is a very compelling solution, because even 6 months to a year ago, small businesses weren't really thinking about all this cyber insurance and should I get that. They're thinking about it now, and they're all getting ready to pull the trigger on this. The brokers are now going out trying to sell this, but to Kirsten's point, it's getting harder to get. In this combined model, you're talking almost like a point and click solution, for lighting up, protecting those endpoints and getting that coverage in place.
So having this solution in place, will this facilitate them being able to get additional insurance? I mean,
Well, yeah, go ahead. And Kirsten has way more info on this than I do, but Kirsten, correct me if I'm wrong here, but having this in place already, since it's a service guarantee, it's not insurance. So it's essentially a bonus. So it's sitting on top of whatever classic cyber liability insurance you already have, or could actually help you protect classic cyber liability insurance, and potentially even help you get a discount on all of that. Is that still accurate, Kristen?
That's completely accurate. And there's another component to this, which is we have turnkey cyber insurance programs that we can layer right on top. So if you wanted another like $1 million, we could just write it for you immediately, because you've already qualified and already met the terms of what that's intended. So part of that program that we have was designed to align with those questionnaires and align with those requirements, so that we're all walking in lockstep with technology providers and the broader cyber insurance market. But the other thing, like we talked about earlier, is that there are many new limitations or higher deductibles as it relates to that as well. And so you might have some cyber policies that have $50,000 or $100,000 deductibles, or it might be you buy a $1 million policy, but they'll only give you 50% coverage for a ransom attack. And so really what this is considered is a reimbursement plan. And so this enables you to have augmentation around what might be limitations of those policies. And so it's really designed to align with those so that you can have lower level protections where you don't have that out of pocket. If you have even a $250,000 policy, but $100,000 isn't covered for the first $100,000 of a ransom attack isn't covered, that's a lot of money for a small business. And so these are the ways for us to be able to bring these together, where you can think of cyber liability products as a sort of a catastrophic loss. It's sort of like catastrophic healthcare, but you have a little AFLAC policy with it, so that you have the ability to pay for deductibles or out-of-pocket expenses that may not be covered in these other programs. But as Chase said, it also gives you some base coverage that covers the key things that are risks to organizations. And also you can take knowledge and care that it's tying to the solutions that are in place for you. And it's designed to help give confidence that these products that have been chosen for this stack are essentially being warranted. If they don't work right, or something happens, or someone makes it through, which happens, and it certainly does occur, then there's a backstop, and that we're all putting our money where our mouth is, that we believe that this is the right deployment model for your type of organization.
Perfect. So kind of backtracking a little bit, how does this coverage work in terms of ransomware and breaches? I mean, what's covered? What does the MSP need to be aware of? What do they need to do, I guess? And then again, for their customer, what are they covered against with this program?
Well, Chase, can you start with the technology elements of what that looks like in terms of the deployment?
Yeah, so our whole mission here is to, again, bring this enterprise class endpoint security to the small business market in this flexible subscription model. So, and that's what we've done in partnership with SciSurance. So what has to happen, of course, number one is to install our XDR software agent on the endpoint, the desktop, laptop, or the server, whether that's physical or in the cloud. We assist with that installation as included as part of the service. We also assist with patch management, so the patches all need to be up to date, and we try to implement and make sure that the requirements like Kristen was talking about, MFA, et cetera, are in place. Once that's lit up and our SOC, 24/7 SOC is live, then we work with SciSurance to submit that to get that activated, usually within 24 hours. So basically within 24 hours, and I think we'll be getting faster in the future, you're talking about locking your endpoints down with enterprise class security that antivirus just cannot protect against. Like antivirus, I think a stat we saw is protecting only against 25% of these modern ransom attacks that are happening today, which is really scary. That's why the whole industry on the endpoint side is moving to XDR. I mean, B of A, every major company, every EDR system is becoming an XDR platform. And that is the default standard that these mid to large enterprises need to protect against these modern threats. So once the XDR is installed and that software agent, then that liability coverage is activated. Right now, it's 24 hours is our current turnaround time.
Great. Yes. And then for us, what we do is we provide reimbursement around a ransom attack or a VEC attack. So if the system there's a takeover, an account takeover, they lock the system down and reset your banking passwords and take money from the bank, then that also would be covered in addition to a ransom attack. There's also the compliance element. So that's for those organizations who live in those states that are really looking at that PII and PHI loss. That would be HIPAA, PCI. There are a lot of organizations like registered investment advisors in the financial sector who are small businesses themselves, but have very stringent SEC requirements around what type of cyber coverages they have in place. So those types of organizations can really benefit. And also, if any organization were to have data leakage as a result of either a ransom attack or just data leakage in general, then that compliance component would also kick in. And there's also then business interruption coverage, so that helps you for downtime, and then a legal liability component. So if there is a lawsuit or a media liability, which is something that's confusing to people, but it's things like having to deal with copyright infringement on your website, as an example. Things like that, where there's some component where like a letter, like one of the case law pieces is a letter went out from a healthcare firm, but because it was electronically generated, but it showed personally identifiable health information because the window was too wide in the envelope, that type of thing would also be covered. So there are some broad sort of esoteric things, but most of the things that people care about, ransom, financial loss from a business email compromise, or fines.
Hey, Cory.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Our gracious hosts, Uplevel and Cory and Tom, Alexander runs that company. That's the whole purpose here, is that we've packaged all this, like we just talked about with SciSurance, and have a unique business partnership, which we launched fairly recently with Uplevel, to provide that, of course, to the large MSP group that Uplevel services and provides products and services to. So very unique that we're able to actually kind of bundle all this together and kind of push it out through Uplevel, because we're seeing that. I mean, it is a field day out there in terms of the opportunity, especially the smaller that you get. And there are so many small businesses start at 500 and you get smaller. I mean, you're talking not just millions, potentially tens of millions of these small businesses, again, throughout the country that do not have anything in place to lock those endpoints down and have that liability coverage from SciSurance.
Yeah, well, to that point, I think it's I think most small businesses think, well, I'm too small to worry about this. Nobody's going to come after me. They're going to go after Target or whomever, as you mentioned earlier. So one question that just came in that we kind of touched on this a few minutes ago, but let's backtrack a little bit. Chase, can you expand on the differences or defining what antivirus is versus a DDR versus XDR?
Yeah, I'll kind of oversimplify. So, antivirus, obviously, kind of the age-old solution, typically a consumer antivirus product that's typically static. So it's working off a static database of known threats that exist. And then it's going out and looking for those potential threats. That's exactly why that's stat. And a lot of this is on our website. You can transmosissite.com if you guys want to see some more of these stats and where they came from. That's why it's increasingly ineffective. And the typical state of the art for endpoint protection, again, typically in the mid to large enterprise, are these EDR systems. And so and now EDR systems, like I said, we're using #1 Gartner rated XDR platform. And really the major update there is that the artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities of these XDR systems is almost like having an entire security team standalone without our security operations, human intelligence component. So what that means, without getting too technical, is that it's able to, once installed on the software agent installed on the endpoint, it's able to look across file, user, host, and network level activity. It's rating, ranking, and scoring threats in real time. It's doing tons of real-time behavioral analysis. So for example, like antivirus solutions don't do that. In our XDR platform, for example, well, this is really weird. Why is this employee downloading a bunch of Dropbox files at 2 a.m? Well, historically, they're based on their behavior that we're watching 24 hours a day. We know that they typically haven't done that. That's going to get flagged by the AI, and the XDR machine learning engine. And it will actually go so far as to quarantine those potential threats. And the real kicker here, though, and this is really key, is that it's not just the tech. I think that's part of the problem, is that you see there's a lot of XDRs out there, a lot of EDRs out there, and they're being sold as these, the AI can kind of do everything, and all you need to do is pay a lower cost for that license and you're all set. The really sophisticated mid to large enterprises who are really focused on locking those endpoints down, 50% of it are these EDR, now XDR AI powered engines. That is connected typically to human intelligence. So these 24-hour security operations center and teams, that's the core of how we got into this business. So not only do we have live US-based 24/7 security operations center analysts that are feeding off that, off that XDR, they're able to take a whole nother level of action on top of what the XDR can do. So for example, a good example there is we're literally doing honeypotting. So anyone in the audience, you guys know this, laying traps for cyber criminals. That's typically something you see in the mid to large enterprise. We're doing that for 20, 30 person companies, even 5-person companies. So, sending out a folder that says passwords on it, laying a trap for that cyber criminal, or that cyber attack, which could come in the form of a 0-day attack. So again, I guess the short answer is going from antivirus, from these static endpoint solutions, to these AI-powered XDRs that are feeding into a live 24/7 SOC, where our SOC team is actually trained on that XDR. So it's not just a random, SOC team that's like trying to figure out this platform. They're trained specifically on this XDR. So what you want is that AI plus that we call HI, human intelligence. You're talking about instantaneous response, to these potential threats before they spread, lock down your network, start trying to ransom or extort you, et cetera.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Briefly, can you maybe talk about the difference between antivirus and next-gen antivirus? I think you and I have spoken on that a while ago.
Well, yeah, and actually that's kind of part of what I was saying before, is that there's a little bit of next-gen AV has some of these AI capabilities, but it's still effectively an antivirus product, not doing things that we just described. So there's kind of a little bit of a false sense of security being marketed to the small business owner that just an NGAV, to use an acronym, is kind of enough to protect them. That's an upgrade from antivirus. That is not the case. Again, for the reasons I just described in the previous response. But what's kind of cool is that more small businesses are looking to have another antivirus product as well. So we actually bundle, our XDR comes with a next generation AV. So it's kind of a nice thing because they get their next generation antivirus, they can actually cancel an existing, consumer antivirus subscription and get that XDR with the NGAV, with the 24/7 SOC.
Perfect. So, okay, well, that kind of wraps up my round of questioning, I guess, in terms of Transmosis and Cysurance. I've got some specific questions that I've taken from our partners over the past few months that I'll offer to you, but also anybody watching, if you have any questions, please, again, put them in the question and answer section. We've had a couple so far. I'll start with this one. Is this available internationally or Canada, or is it currently only in the US?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
actually international. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Kristen. What are you talking about?
No, it's more important for you.
No, I've been talking too much here. So I know you wanted to address some of the things I pointed out to you on the previous, I was talking about. So yes, US and international, obviously not being able to be sold to countries that are deemed hostile, via the State Department. So I'll hand to Kirsten there in terms of liability coverage, internet liability protection is what we call it. We can't use the word coverage since it's a service warranty.
Yes, so it is, there are some limitations in APAC and the Asia region because of how they structure or limit like ransom payments and other types of those coverages. But generally, yes, we can help support and bundle with this internationally and certainly in Canada as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. So Chase, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle here with Cysurance and Transmosis and Uplevel, and we've touched on this again a little bit, but how does all of this work in terms of, you've got licensing agreements, who signs agreements? We touched on this too, but what's the MSP responsible for? What's the SMB responsible for? How does all this stuff work?
Yeah, exactly. How is it sold? So I noted earlier, it's sold, we sell entirely through the channel. So you're talking about a bundled subscription solution, everything included, including custom setup. We spend a lot of time where most people might be just building one singular software product. We spend a lot of time over the last year or two packaging and pulling all this together so it could be delivered in an easy point and click monthly subscription model, no contracts. And that's what we've done. And of course, with Cysurance, bundled into that. And so that's sold through the channel. We have a unique economic relationship, of course, with Uplevel, which is part of the point of our webinar here. And so they've got a unique pricing model associated with this. Again, the same product that we're selling throughout, through the rest of the channel. The MSP, how it typically works is, like I said, a lot of the MSPs hear this, they're like, I need to be protected. So we do that quite a bit. We do, we'll do discounted rates for that. But essentially what's happening is we're providing the sales and marketing back end to help MSPs, really any distributor, IT consulting firms, VARs, agents, et cetera, to evangelize and sell this to the small business customer. That is the biggest problem that we have. I think also Cysurance has, it's a marketing problem. This is a very unique solution. And there's tens of millions of businesses out there that we know need this, that don't have anything protecting endpoints or using consumer antivirus. Like that's the target market. So it's a rich target market. And it's a marketing problem that we have. This is exactly the reason why we packaged it and why we're working with Uplevel and why we're doing webinars like this, so we can continue not just to call small businesses up and tell them that they need this, but to paint the picture, what we did on this webinar, and especially that financial liability. That's really what this is all about. This, as a small business owner, that's all they care about. You want to run your business and reduce your financial liability. They understand insurance. This is why Cysurance packaged into this is, so powerful. And then we provide a ton of sales and marketing support. Some of our distributors go so far as to, we help them set up their own landing pages as well. And then we have a whole back-end sales team that will help do sales pitches until they're comfortable enough selling it. Because again, like I said, a lot of this is marketing and evangelizing that it even exists.
Sure. So a question came in, speaking on antivirus, and I think it was, you mentioned that traditional antivirus is about 25% effective, at least over the last year or so. Do we have any data on the success rate of the Transmosis XDR platform in terms of blocked attacks? Any information that you can share on that?
Well, yeah. So our XDR is, I guess, 3 months ago, rated the #1 XDR by Gartner Group in the world. And I think maybe the most important stat here is that we have not had a claim. We launched over a year ago. So That's a really big deal. We haven't had to, go back through cysurance and to the reinsurers to pay out a claim on that. So, and the XDR we're using is constantly being iterated and upgraded. I think really it's due to those two combinations, not that, hey, we have the best XDR software in the world, which we think we do through Gartner, but it's having that human intelligence and being able to train our security analysts specifically on that product. That's exactly, like I said, what B of A is doing. It's almost $1 trillion company, and we're providing that level of big business protection to that, to that small business wrapped in that easy subscription model.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I think Chase is talking too much. I got a question for you, Chris.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the big common questions I get is how can our partners and their customers be sure that if there is an attack, that you're going to pay?
Well, that's one of the components of our solution that we really wanted to create value with our product. There are some warranty type products out there for certain organizations, and they're designed not to pay, right? They're designed to really limit those losses. Where we try to focus is to, as Chase just said, really focus on not only the technology implementation, but it's why I believe that the services component is so critical, because what we're looking at is if you have an incident and you can prove you had an incident, and that's the thing for us, that there's proof that it occurred and you had those elements running, then it's covered. And that's really the key. So it's not more complex than that. And that's one of the nice things about a service warranty versus complete insurance, because the service warranty, it's like, this thing didn't happen when it was supposed to happen, then there's coverage for it. And so it really allows us to draw a direct linkage between the deployment and a payout. And that's not to say, again, that it's because the product isn't effective. We just know that, just like there aren't zero car crashes or zero house fires, there aren't also zero cyber events. And I think that's one of the things that the marketplace is becoming more comfortable with, is not that zero is the answer related to cyber. And that's why being able to catch things rapidly and remediate rapidly is so key, because it's not about not paying, it's about really managing the incident such that we can really contain the cost of that incident, and everyone's happy with that outcome.
Okay, thank you. Question came in, do I need to install the XDR software on every single device, or can I only install it on devices I want covered? Also, what about things such as printers or speakers? I mean, you had mentioned that the Target thing came through the HVAC system. So how do we cover those things? Yeah,
very good question. So we don't require, but highly recommend you install the XDR on every endpoint that you have in the organization, desktop, laptop, server, whether physical or virtual, because obviously you could, if you're not installing it, you have a breach there, we're not going to be able to, our cysurance will not be able to pay out a claim. Not to mention that's a vulnerable access point onto the network, or even having a ransom or an extortion event. So really key to have that installed everywhere. The second question related to IoT devices, even mobile as well. That's something that the industry doesn't cover. So endpoint protection is focused, like I said, around desktop, laptop, servers. There's entirely different security protocols and operating system platforms and hardware providers, of course, Apple, et cetera. So that's a very different world. And there's security tools there. XDR may be kind of headed in that direction, but we do not provide that. Industry doesn't really provide that either. However, I will say that if you look at all these remote workers, if you're locking down your endpoint in your home, for example, and you're an employee, typically the number one objective for these cyber criminals is to get your endpoint. Well, so they're going to try to come through everywhere. We see this all the time. So they want to get on the home, insecure wireless router. That's extremely common, obviously. We see a lot of stories about that. Even IoT devices now, they're all sitting on the home wireless network. So they're all, even on mobile device, I got my mobile, on the Wi-Fi at home. Again, what are they all trying to do? They're trying to get on the network, and then they're trying to get to that endpoint. So our combined solution, our cysurance, protects there. So we're kind of protecting the core. They're all trying to get to that endpoint. So I would kind of use this simple analogy of it's like a cell. So on the outside, there's all these things that are trying to kind of block all the incoming, but you can't stop it. It's just a never-ending barrage of incoming. We're all trying to get to that cell nucleus, which is the endpoint. And so we're protecting there. So coming off the wireless router, off the IoT device, to answer your question, we're trying to get to that endpoint. Of course, we're locking that down, protecting it.
Okay. So another question is, if there was an event in progress or something that happened, would the end user or the MSP get notification? How does that process work?
Yes, very good question. So we are a managed endpoint protection service. So think of us as the fully managed endpoint cybersecurity team. We're offloading everything. Our job is to remove work for the MSP, for the IT consulting firm, especially for the small business. That's what you see with a lot of these EDR systems. They're really cool in the enterprise, but they're sending all the alerts and all the work to the MSP or the MSSP to deal with it. Or if they don't have that, they're going straight to the IT person at the company. Well, we eliminate all of that. So we're the fully outsourced team. We're managing all of that. So all those alerts and all the actioning happening in the XDR, it's happening in real time in the XDR behind the scenes, being fed, of course, to the 24-hour SOC team. They're taking their whole layer of actions. All of that is happening behind the scenes. The SOC team will literally go so far as to take over a computer and prevent that from spreading into a network-wide event. So that's our job. Just again, like the B of A's of the world, that's exactly what, overgeneralizing, that's exactly what's happening behind the scenes there. So we actually have a kind of a unique problem where we're building things to kind of help fix this, to show that this is actually working. So we do that through, of course, regular reporting, to our MSPs, and we can provide view-only, live dashboards for that. We're going to have even better ways in the future to show that. But all this is happening behind the scenes. We're taking that full workload off. Some of our MSPs like to push out through RMM tools, like Kristen was talking about, which is great. So now we can integrate with just about any RMM tool on the market. Makes it easy, really easy to flip a switch. But again, those MSPs, they got to stay on top of their. We're not an MSP, of course. We're not an IT consulting firm. So the MSP, MSSP is still responsible for staying on top of their customers. If they're adding new computers, making sure they let us know so we can add the XDR to those new computers.
Sure. And then on top of that, I assume there's reporting that can be sent out to the MSP on a regular basis that they can share with their small business clients, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We provide really slick monthly, sometimes bi-monthly reporting to the MSP. Then they wrap that up and package that and provide that as part of the overall suite of reporting they provide to their customers.
All right. Well, in that last answer, you also answered another question I was just about to get to. I'll state the question just so everybody hears it, but somebody had asked about security awareness training for end users. And yes, I mean, we do have those resources available. Another one is, and we spoke on this a little bit earlier, but does Cysurance, provide standard cyber liability coverage? And do you partner with other cyber insurance firms as well, or just Cysurance,
Yes. So the answer is yes and yes. So we work with many of the large carriers, and we have discounted programs with them and special programming, as well as our own solutions.
Excellent. Okay. One more question that I had was, Chase, one of the more common objections that I get from our partners is that a lot of their SMB customers are looking to cut cost right now. They're not looking to add cost. So how do you recommend MSPs go about presenting this topic to their clients? How should they start to overcome these cost objections with their clients?
Yeah. This webinar is actually the part answer to that question, which how we present it. And this is very different than a lot of cybersecurity companies, is the financial liability that they're carrying. I think the industry has a problem because they're always marketing on technology. Small business owner is a very different animal than a mid to large enterprise. Small business owner doesn't know the difference between our XDR and another XDR. SMBs might, and of course we kick butt there too, but these small business owners, they don't know that difference. So how we typically come at it is, do you know how much financial liability you're carrying, and did you know it's all living in your endpoints? The majority of it, it's almost like, what's the biggest problem we can solve for you? And it's the liability sitting in the endpoints. So that small business owner, they understand insurance and liability more than they understand cybersecurity technology. So we tend to come at it from that angle with the smaller guys, call it sub 100, employee companies. For the bigger guys that are more sophisticated SMBs, we have a lot of customers that are in the 300 to 500 endpoint range and even larger. We take, of course, a different approach because you've got a cybersecurity person there. They want to see a technical demo of our AI machine learning engine XDR, versus Huntresses or CrowdStrike's, whoever it is. And by the way, we do really well there. We have a whole separate comparison chart against those leading competitors, including guys that I just mentioned that Cory can send out. And that's usually more involved, and we got to do technical demos, et cetera. Still quite a lot of business to be done there. But like I said, as you get smaller, you see less security, and this combined solution with SciSurance is extremely relevant for them today.
Perfect, thank you. Another question is, are there any limitations in terms of locations for SciSurance? I assume all 50 states. We spoke about Canada and Europe. Any other limitations that our customers need to be aware of?
No, and we can provide both cyber liability and this solution.
Perfect. Okay, so, well, there's another question. How much overhead does your software add to the customer's devices?
A very good question. So it's installed as a software agent. Along the XDR comes, like I said, with next generation antivirus installed on the endpoint, desktop, laptop, server, physical or virtual. We have not had any major processing issues related to the performance of the desktop or the laptop or the server on the end of that. Once in a while it does happen, depending upon how they're configured. Then our SOC team we actually have the ability to throttle that, so we can throttle it back. I think default's like 10 or 15%, kind of processor usage. We can dial it back to like sub 5% and still be operational.
Okay. My last question, unless anybody else has one here, is how do MSPs sign up? And I'll answer this one. Do the end users need to be Uplevel customers in order to get Transmosis? And the answer is no, but they should be. So, but how do MSPs sign up? How do they sign up their clients?
Yeah, well, they're signing up through Uplevel, through this partnership we've been working on for many, many months. And we have a really slick back-end infrastructure and e-commerce system that we've recently launched. And so we're just getting better at, trying to automate a lot of this. In fact, we're going to be beta testing a new service, same service, but more point and click for these micro businesses. I've got to come up with a better term for that. But, 10 to 20, 30 employees, like you can't do tens of millions of phone calls, right, to all those customers. So, or you guys have a lot of customers like that, but we can't do a phone call and run through, to try to close them manually. So there'll be a point and click solution essentially coming soon. You'll hear about it probably first through Uplevel. But we have a pretty slick model that's getting much more efficient and dialed in through Uplevel in terms of signing up. You just need to contact Cory.
Okay. So those are the questions I had. I don't see any fresh questions coming in on the Q&A. Before I let everybody go, did we miss any key points, Kristen, that you think we should be talking about? Anything else that you'd like to mention?
No, I think that really covers it. I mean, I would say that the alignment is reduction of severity, impact, and frequency of events, both from an insurance standpoint and from just the security perspective. And so this is a tremendous alignment because we're working towards a same objective, and I think it can really help, especially small businesses, get control of risks that are very, very difficult to understand. Yeah, and I would just end on how I started, which is I think this partnership, and especially with SciSurance and Transmosis going through Uplevel, is really pioneering what I think was one of the biggest trends in the industry, which is this combination of advanced cybersecurity technology with the liability coverage and making it easier to get access to both, because it solves huge problems on both sides, right? The insurer now has minimum requirements that they need to provide, liability protection for, and now that small business owner does not need to navigate XDRs and SOCs and liability coverage. They can kind of effectively get pre-approved in one package. We see this as a bigger, ongoing trend where we're in the infancy stages of that.
Quick question just came in. Yes, I will be making this recording available, and we'll send it out in a variety of ways. So absolutely. Thank you for that question. So, okay. Any other questions from the audience in the last minute or so? And Chase and Kristen, was there anything else that you guys would like to add?
No.
All right.
Thank you,
well, I appreciate your time, both to Chase and Kirsten, and of course, everybody that took time out of their schedules to sit and listen. We will be making this available. Send me, okay, I will do so, Chuck. Thank you. Just asking for pricing structures. So we will get that done, but I appreciate everybody taking time to join us, and we will make this available to watch at a later date. So thank you very much. Oh, and one more thing, I guess, if you do have questions that come up after the fact, you can send them to me and I will certainly pass them along to the appropriate people and get them answered for you. So thanks again and have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.